From the field to the film room to the war room, we've got you covered every step of the way as the road to the draft starts right now on BGN Radio. Hello and welcome to another episode of the BGN Draft Show. I am your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter and YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. I'm joined today by my co-host and fellow draft enthusiast Deibs. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Be sure to check out his podcast, Party on Broad. Deibs, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. Gearing up. You know, the championship game is just a few days away. Let's get it.
Yeah, we're as a podcast, we're a little bit in shambles over here. Deibs is sick. I'm sick. Mark's gone. The championship's coming. We've been trying to get this show recorded for several days, and finally we just had to do it with the two of us. So we wanted to get something in your feed, recapping the college football playoff semifinals, talking about the championship game. Oh, by the way, I'm trying to close on a house in the middle of this whole thing. So it's been a mess lately, but we're here to talk about some football. And Deibs, the college football semifinal games did not disappoint.
Yeah.
Let's just start with the first one. We've had number 1 Michigan versus number 4 Alabama. This game ended up in overtime with Michigan winning 27-20, which is a little bad for the brand because we universally picked Alabama to win this game. However, when you get into overtime, I think we were close enough. So it could have gone either way. This game was wire to wire. Nobody ever led by more than 7 points in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan was up 13-10 at halftime. Alabama took a lead 17-13 and then pushed it out to 20-13 with under 5 minutes to play. And then Michigan had their only score of the second half. They answered with an 8-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to tie the game with under 2 minutes left. And there was a kind of a crazy sequence where Alabama was going to try to score, and then they didn't. And Michigan called a timeout so they could get the ball back, but then muffed a punt and recovered it inside the 1-yard line. You thought this game could end on a safety.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up going into overtime. Michigan takes ball. Blake Corum scores on 2 carries, puts the pressure on Alabama. And it ultimately came down to a 4th and goal, from the 3-yard line. Alabama went QB run. Jalen Milroe was stopped short. I hopped on Twitter to make a joke about Brian Johnson, and like the top 8 posts on my feed were other people making the same joke. Gotta love Eagles Twitter. But Michigan emerges from this game victorious. They will go to the college football championship game on Monday night. Deibs, what stuck out to you in this game?
Yeah, I thought a top storyline heading into that one was how Michigan would match up against Alabama's offensive line. I thought the Wolverines dominated in the trenches. The pressure they put on Jalen Milroe, coming from all over, bullying freshman left tackle Caden Proctor, especially in the first half. They had 5 of their 6 sacks in the first half. Most were coming on early downs, forcing Alabama, behind the sticks over and over and over again. It was really impressive how the Wolverines executed the blitz and remained disciplined throughout the majority of the game. They were able to corral Milroe for chunk losses. I thought Alabama's offensive line showed its inexperience. There were repeated missed blocks. There were poor preparation all across the board for Alabama, continuously shooting themselves in the foot with penalties or fumbles or botched snaps, what have you. But you got to give a shout out to Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Michigan Wolverines, for cooking up a game plan that really got into the real estate of Jalen Milroe. Even though Alabama led for most of that game, like not an ounce of me thought that they were comfortably in the lead or the game was even remotely close to being over, especially with Milroe and Michigan kind of limiting the air attack. So then you get to that final stand by Michigan. It wasn't a pass rush, but like the final play by the Wolverines was just another example of how Michigan's terrific performance up front sealed the deal. The defense stunted inside. They clogged running lanes. It was just top to bottom an impressive performance from the Michigan front seven.
Yeah, the people that didn't watch the game, one of the biggest negatives, I guess, what honestly ends up probably costing Alabama the game is their center play. Just awful snaps all game, even snaps that, even on the last play of the game, which you could debate the merits of a QB run when out of shotgun, when your center's been having problems snapping all game. But even that snap was bad. Like Milroe was having to corral a lot of bad snaps. He had 3 fumbles in the game. Some of that came from bad snaps. And that's just, it's inexcusable for a program like Alabama to be in the postseason and have this play from your center. I don't know how that's not sorted out throughout the season. But it really is those little things. And Michigan had their own little things. Michigan's special teams was horrendous. They muff a punt. They miss an extra point. They missed a field goal. That could have cost them as well. So there were a lot of little things on both sides. But Michigan is able to get it done. And they will face off against Washington, who, fortunately for our BGN Draft brand, Washington did win their game against Texas, because not only did we unanimously pick them, we unanimously picked them to win the whole thing before this started. And that looked in doubt for a while. I didn't watch this whole game live. Again, sick. I watched like the first quarter and went to bed, and I watched the rest of it later. But this was a tremendous game.
Yeah, it was.
Back and forth all first half. It was knotted up 21-21 at halftime. And in the second half, Washington pushed their lead out, courtesy of 2 fumbles and a punt from Texas on their first 3 possessions. And Washington led this game 34-21 with under 12 minutes to play. And this almost became one of the greatest collapses in like college football history. They punt it back to Texas, who goes on a touchdown drive and pulled it within 8. The teams trade field goals. Washington ends up getting the ball up 6 with 66 seconds left to play. And 3 Dylan Johnson runs. Didn't pick up a first down. It did drain timeouts, but they only ran 21 seconds off the clock, and Texas gets the ball with under a minute left to play, aided by a kick-catch interference on the punt. Quinn Ewers hits Jordan Whittington for a 41-yard pass to get down to the Washington 28-yard line. Then they get down to the 12, and they end up with 4 shots into the end zone from the 12-yard line, and they just come up short. So it was a remarkable game, watching these guys trade blows back and forth, and I don't know what more you can ask for. It didn't go to overtime, but to end with the chance to throw it into the end zone, not only for overtime, but for a win, was a phenomenal game. Michael Penix Jr. ends up throwing for 430 yards and 2 touchdowns in this one. Dylan Johnson rushed for 2 touchdowns. Man, Washington's so much fun to watch. What did you take away from this one?
Yeah, the top takeaway for me was the Michael Penix slander has to stop. I mean, this guy has shown over and over and over again that he's just a straight up gamer, man. Washington didn't end the season as dominant as they wanted to. But for some reason, at least on my timeline, at least around, the college football area, like there are some doubters about Michael Penix Jr. And it's really hard to overstate just how good Penix was in that game Monday night. You touched on the numbers, but like the way he evaded pressure is something we've seen all season long. His pressure to sack ratio of 8.1%, one of the best marks in the nation. He threw downfield over and over and over again. His average depth of target was beyond 9 yards. He was credited for 6 big-time throws, zero turnover-worthy plays in this game. That's the Michael Penix we've seen all season long, taking big shots down the sidelines, trusting his receivers to draw penalties, fitting throws into tight windows. It was the best quarterback performance in the playoffs since Joe Burrow. And the chemistry we saw in that one between Adunze and Polk and McMillan and Michael Penix Jr. is just on a different level, man. The haters were silenced. I also thought the Longhorns really missed Jonathan Brooks. We touched on that during the semifinal preview. He's a day 2 guy for me. Love that guy. Really, really great prospect. But, replacements, Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter, both very good prospects in their own right. They're both young, but both had crucial fumbles in crucial moments in this one. One during Texas's first possession after halftime, another in Washington territory at the start of the fourth quarter. So both turnovers were just massive in the difference in this game. But again, major credit to Michael Penix Jr. And just stop doubting this dude, man. He delivers over and over and over again when he needs to.
Yeah, Michael Penix Jr. is going to be one of the most interesting draft quarterback prospects this year because, he will turn 24 before his rookie season starts. He's torn his right ACL twice. He's got an SC injury to one shoulder, an AC joint injury to the other shoulder. So you're looking at a guy that's going to be very old as a rookie. He's got significant injury history, and he doesn't have a ton of mobility. Like, he's more of a pocket passer. It's more of a dying breed, and then you got to factor in like the guys that he's throwing to. Like, he's got so much talent around him. Like, it's going to be a really interesting to see how teams treat him in the draft. Like, honestly, you could tell me right now, Michael Penix Jr. is a top 10 pick, or he doesn't go until the end of the second round, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Sure.
He has a wide range of outcomes, and I can't wait to see like what teams think about him as we get closer to it. But there's no doubt he looked incredible in this game, like he did for most of the season.
Yeah, I think it's pretty solidified that, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels are your top three. After that, it's pretty much wide open for this quarterback class.
Yeah. All right, well, let's spin it forward to the championship game. It'll be at 7:30 Eastern time on Monday night. Michigan versus Washington, the top two seeds in the thing starting out. The two teams that were undefeated face off. As of right now, Washington is about a 4.5 point underdog in this one. Now, we already picked Washington before this whole thing started. We all picked Washington to win. We thought they would be playing Alabama. Dibes, does anything you watched last Monday, does it change your pick, or are you still riding with the Huskies here?
I'm still riding with the Huskies, man. They've been my team all year long. You start with Michigan. It's got to just like the Alabama game. This game is all on J.J. McCarthy yet again to kind of keep his head down and limit turnovers as much as possible. Washington's defense can be exposed, and I could easily see Washington giving up some chunk yards to Blake Corum, who's arguably the best Michigan running back ever, which is crazy to say. Kudos to Blake Corum for breaking that touchdown record. But Washington kind of has a bend, don't break defense that, they do force turnovers. They do keep teams out of the end zone when it counts the most. The good news for Michigan is that they take care of the ball really well. They only have 8 giveaways this season. So I think this game is all about McCarthy limiting mistakes. You look at the Alabama game, McCarthy got a little lucky sometimes, whether it was a tip pass or an interception that was caught out of bounds on the sideline. Michigan cannot afford to shoot themselves in the foot against a really quality Washington squad, because like when you look at like turnover margin, when you look at penalties, kicking games, special teams, coverage, Washington is so good in all the little ways, all the little areas that truly make up the difference in these kind of games. So that's a little bit about Michigan. But when it comes to Washington, man, this game, I think, is all about Penix's biggest test of the year. You look at this pass defense of Michigan, and, they rank top 10 in yards per game, yards per attempt, completion percentage, QB rating, interceptions, team pass efficiency. You could go on and on about how good this Michigan pass defense really is. But like on the other end, Michigan has never faced the offensive firepower of Washington and the quantity of weapons they have at their disposal. So for Washington, I'm looking at how Penix handles that Michigan blitz. The Wolverines entered the Rose Bowl with a pressure rate of 42% of the season. That was the 5th best in FBS. And this was a Michigan team that didn't really blitz a lot until we saw a lot of stunts and stuff against Alabama. So I'm really intrigued to see how, obviously Jalen Milroe is not the opposite of Michael Penix Jr. Penix Jr. wants to stay in the pocket. But yeah, let's keep an eye on how Penix handles this Michigan blitz, because Penix's completion percentage drops big time when under pressure, 73.7% to 44.6% when under pressure. The good news for Washington, Washington's O-line is arguably the best in college football. They only have given up 11 sacks in 14 games this one. So that's a huge thing I'm watching. You know, how Michigan attacks Michael Penix Jr. Can they rattle him? Can the Michigan defensive line handle the Washington O-line? Washington O-line is nasty, man. They have been nearly perfect all year long. And my vibe is that continues, and I expect Washington to beat Michigan.
Yeah, this is a clash of styles. Like, there's really nothing I want to talk about Michigan offense versus Washington defense. That's whatever. Like, we'll see what happens. Everything that's of intrigue to me is Washington's offense against Michigan's defense. I mean, you look at it, it's the number one passing offense in Washington, who's throwing for 350 yards a game, against the number 2 pass defense in Michigan, who's only allowing 150 yards per game. It's Washington's offensive line that you mentioned, who's only allowed 11 sacks all year, against Michigan, who has 16 sacks in their last 4 games. Like, this game will be won in the trenches. It will be won based off of if Michigan can disrupt the Washington passing attack. Washington can't play a grinded out game against Michigan. They will lose. Like, and similarly, I don't know that Michigan can play a shootout type game like Washington just played with Texas. They will lose. And so, you know, if this is a high scoring game, you know, maybe if you're picking Washington, maybe you look at over unders and you bet overs instead. Cause I think if it's a high scoring game, Washington definitely wins. Michigan is going to have to drag Washington's offense down into the muck and beat them there. And they can do that. Like, they ride Blake Corum in that rushing attack, and Washington rides Roma Dunze and a group of super talented wide receivers. I'm not swayed off of my pick of Washington. Their disastrous game management at the end of the game aside against Texas, hopefully that's something, you know, they learn from. The little thing I'm watching for in this game is that Michigan special teams. Like, it was really bad, and it almost cost them the game against Alabama. And I mentioned it in the recap, but they muffed a punt that could have let that game not go into overtime. That muffed a punt inside the 1 yard line, almost safety to end the game. They missed an extra point. They missed a field goal in the semifinal. Those little things can add up in a game where I think the margins are this small. Generally speaking, though, I take offense over defense. I think offense, it's just so hard to shut down an elite offense for 4 quarters. And maybe that's my NFL bias creeping in, because at the college level, you can ride a defense a little better than the NFL. Corners are allowed to play a little more physically and all of those things. You know, we've seen Alabama ride dominant defenses, and Georgia when the offenses weren't as good, but the defense took over the game. I just don't think that's going to happen here. So I'll take Washington. I'll definitely take Washington in the 4.5 points.
Yeah.
And I'll pick them to win and cover this game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. This Washington team, you know, they've dealt with adversity. And just like I said, if Michigan, if JJ McCarthy starts throwing interceptions, if he throws, you know, picks, or balls into tight windows, you know, this is an opportunistic Washington defense. Yeah, they can get carved up a little bit, but they make you pay for your mistakes. So it's not a great defense like Michigan, but they seem to deliver when it matters most.
Yeah, and I too. It's just when you look at that clash of styles, one mistake can cripple Michigan. You know, Michigan gets a fumble like Texas did, and all of a sudden Washington can have a 2-score lead like that. And now you're trying to play from behind, which you're not equipped to do, versus a high-flying offense like Washington. You bust a coverage or you fumble the ball once and give up an easy touchdown. It's no sweat. Like, you can make that up. I just feel like there's a lot wider margin for error for that team with the high-flying offense. So should be a great game. Really excited to check it out. So glad it doesn't kick off at like 9 o'clock or some nonsense like that. Give me the 7:30 start time. I will definitely have my eyes glued to that on Monday. So, Dives, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts you want to throw out about this game or draft season coming up?
No, I'm excited to continue our draft coverage. Final thoughts on the game is Dylan Johnson's injury status. Apparently, he will be good to go for Monday's championship game, but that's a guy that Washington utilizes heavily to kind of keep defenses off balance. And he's their kind of red zone guy as well. So keep an eye on that injury. From what I understand, he will be good to go. But Dylan Johnson is a major X factor for this Huskies team.
Yep. All right. Well, that's going to about do it. Thank you guys for joining us for our final, I don't know, it's not regular season, but final in-season episode of the BGN Draft Show. The show is not going anywhere. We're going to figure out a schedule. Those of you that are longtime listeners of the show, you know we're going to do position rankings for every position. There will be mock drafts. There will be day 3 podcasts. We're going to do a lot of stuff covering in the lead up to the draft. Obviously, we're going to be very Eagles focused in that, but we're going to do quarterback rankings for, completion stuff. So if you guys have certain aspects, certain things you want us to cover beyond position rankings and mock drafts, let us know. My DMs are open on Twitter at Shane Haff NFL. We want to get you guys the draft coverage that you want. If you enjoyed this show, be sure you hit the subscribe button so you get every show in the BGN radio feed. You can check us out on Twitter. I'm at Shane Haff NFL. Deibs is at Mr. Crockpot, and we will catch you guys next time for another episode of the BGN Draft Show.